Imagine, if you will, standing at the edge of a quiet lake just moments before the storm breaks. The water is still almost eerily so. The sky above is painted in gray hues, and the birds have gone silent. You know something is coming. You feel it, but you are not afraid. You've prepared for this. Now imagine the same storm catching you unaware, arriving like a thief in the night, ripping up trees, shattering windows, and drenching everything in chaos. Which would you rather face, the storm you saw coming, or the one you chose to ignore? This is where our story begins. You see, life doesn't always knock before entering. It barges in unannounced, and sometimes with devastating force. A sudden illness, the betrayal of a friend, the loss of a job, a car accident, a phone call in the middle of the night. These are the storms of human experience, and though we cannot stop them, we can prepare ourselves to meet them, not with panic, but with poise. Not with despair, but with clarity. There is a quiet power in preparation. The Stoics called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. But don't let the name mislead you. This isn't pessimism. It's not about expecting the worst for the sake of misery. It's about stepping into the future with eyes wide open and asking, what if this doesn't go the way I hope? What if the worst does happen? What then? Seneca, that Roman statesman and philosopher, once wrote, "He robs present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand." This is the essence of Stoicism, not indifference, but endurance, not numbness, but discipline. Let's walk slowly into this idea together, not as theorists or armchair philosophers, but as human beings, fallible, emotional, vulnerable. Let's sit with the ancient wisdom that has helped soldiers, emperors, monks, and wanderers endure suffering, not by ignoring it, but by facing it before it arrives. Take Marcus Aurelius, for instance, the philosopher king. At night before sleep took him, he would journal quietly to himself. Today I may encounter ingratitude, arrogance, deceit, betrayal. He wasn't casting a dark spell over the day to come. He was bracing his mind as a warrior tightens the straps of his armor before battle. He understood that to expect only smooth sailing was to be naive. To imagine the worst, however, was not to summon it, but to rob it of its surprise. And what a difference that makes. A woman named Eliza once told me a story that has never left me. She was 64 when we met, a quiet, dignified widow who had lived through more than her share of sorrow. Her husband died suddenly of a heart attack while they were watching the news one evening. Just like that, he was gone, no warning, no goodbye. For weeks, grief clawed at her chest like an animal, but Eliza was no stranger to Stoicism. For years, she had been reading Epictetus, reminding herself that nothing in life is truly ours, not our possessions, not even the people we love. We must love them, she told me, as if they are on loan. And because of this habit of mind, her grief, though deep, did not destroy her. It came, she said, but I had already welcomed it in my mind long ago. I was ready. That is the gift of Premeditatio Malorum. It does not prevent the fall, but it makes the landing bearable. It teaches us to hold life gently like a bird in our palm, never so tight that we crush it, never so loose that it flies away. It shows us how to live, not in fear, but in wisdom. Because once you have imagined the worst, you can begin to live fully in the present, unchained from dread. There's something strangely freeing about naming the monsters before they arrive. It's as if they shrink under the light. The Stoics knew this. They practiced it like a form of spiritual exercise. Each morning or evening, they would contemplate the possibilities of failure, rejection, injury, illness, even death, not to invite them, but to rehearse their response. Think of it like fire drills for the soul. And yet, modern life teaches us the opposite, doesn't it? We are told to stay positive, to manifest success, to visualize the best. And there is value in optimism, of course there is. But optimism without resilience is a glass tower. Beautiful to behold, but fragile in the face of real hardship. The Stoic way, by contrast, is grounded. It acknowledges life's impermanence. It prepares the mind, not just the calendar. And most importantly, it honors the truth that we are not in control of outcomes, only our reactions to them. This isn't a rejection of joy, it is its safeguard. Let's return for a moment to Marcus Aurelius. He ruled an empire during times of plague war and personal loss. His words, written in solitude and never intended for publication, have survived for centuries because they speak directly to our fragile human condition. He once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So, I ask you now, what storm are you pretending won't come? Maybe it's the slow aging of your body, the unspoken tension in your family, the career that may not last, the partner who may leave, or the child who may suffer. These are difficult thoughts, but they are not morbid, they are courageous, and they are necessary. To practice Premeditatio Malorum is to walk through the shadows with a candle not to be consumed by darkness, but to understand it. To welcome the full spectrum of life, not just its pleasures. And when we do this consistently, something begins to change within us. We become less reactive, less shaken. We stop being surprised by hardship, and instead begin to meet it with a calm kind of grace. We stop expecting the world to treat us gently, and in that moment, we become truly strong. This is not a one-time insight, it's a lifelong discipline, and that's why this journey will take us through 10 conversations, 10 evenings, if you will, by the firelight of philosophy. We will walk with the Stoics. We will learn from their battles and their silence, from their triumphs and their losses, and we will apply their ancient tools to the modern world, not as museum pieces, but as living instruments for our peace of mind. In the next part of our journey, we'll dive deeper into the mechanics of mental rehearsal. How exactly did the Stoics prepare their minds for adversity? What techniques did they use, and how can we make them our own? But for now, I invite you to sit with this question as the day ends. What are you afraid to imagine? Because in that imagination lies your preparation. And in preparation, there is peace. Last time we stood together at the edge of the storm. Not to escape it, but to face it. Not with trembling, but with preparation. We opened the door to Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of imagining adversity before it arrives. Now, let's step a little further in. Let's talk not just about why we prepare, but how. What does it look like in real terms to rehearse misfortune without becoming paralyzed by it? How can a practice so focused on imagining the worst actually lead us to a more peaceful, joyful, and courageous life? Imagine for a moment that your mind is a theater. Each day you are both actor and director of what takes place on its stage. Some scenes are written by fate, unexpected, unscripted. Others, though, are yours to rehearse. Now, ask yourself, would you rather enter life stage blind or prepared for your role? The Stoics believed that the most important performances in life are not the ones we give to the world, but the ones we give to ourselves. Take Epictetus, a former slave, who became one of the most revered Stoic teachers. He taught his students not to shy away from imagining hardship, but to lean into it gently and regularly. Keep before your eyes, he said, everyday death and exile, and everything that seems terrible, but most especially death. Then you will never have any base thought, nor too eager a desire. What does this mean in practice? It means spending quiet moments early in the morning, or just before sleep, asking yourself not just what could go right, but what could go wrong. It means imagining the unexpected knock at the door, the lost opportunity the moment the floor disappears beneath your feet. Not to suffer twice, but to suffer less when the moment arrives. This is not morbid, it is mature. Let me tell you a story. There was once a fireman named Joseph from Colorado. He'd been in the service for 22 years, a man built not just of muscle, but of stillness. During one interview, a journalist asked him, "Aren't you ever afraid running into burning buildings?" Joseph smiled. "Of course I'm afraid, but I've already lived that fear in my head 100 times. I've imagined every stair collapsing, every smoke-filled hallway. So when the real moment comes, I'm not frozen. I'm ready." That's Premeditatio Malorum. Practice not in the classroom, but in life. You and I may not be running into flames, but we all walk through fire of our own kinds. A difficult conversation we know we must have. A painful goodbye we feel is approaching. The possibility of financial loss, health setbacks, disappointment, rejection. These are our fires, and just like Joseph, we can walk into them better if we've already walked through them in our minds. The key is gentleness. You don't rush into these thoughts like a soldier into battle. You enter slowly. You sit with them. You explore their weight not to be crushed, but to become familiar. You say to yourself, what if I lost this job? What if I failed at this task? What if my health declined? How would I react? What would I still have control over? And then in that imagined space, you begin to see not just the pain, but the path. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that it is not events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The Stoics taught that there is a gap between the world's chaos and our inner world, and that gap is where our power lives. So, when we mentally rehearse tragedy or loss, we are not trying to predict life. We are training ourselves to respond to it with greater calm. This is what athletes do, what astronauts do, what surgeons do. They don't just practice their skill. They visualize every possible mistake so that if it does occur, their mind has already walked that ground. And here's where the transformation happens. When you imagine losing your comfort, you begin to appreciate it more. When you imagine the death of a loved one not to be cruel, but to acknowledge impermanence, you begin to love them more deeply today. When you picture your own death, you begin to live more honestly. This is not gloom. This is gratitude sharpened by clarity. There's a story told of a Japanese swordsman, Miyamoto Musashi, who meditated on death every single day, not because he was obsessed with dying, but because he believed that a warrior who fears death is already half defeated. To live fully, one must first make peace with the fact that all things end. The Stoics would have nodded in agreement, and you, watching this now, may feel a tension rise. You may think, but won't thinking about bad things make me anxious? Let me gently offer another view. Have you ever had a nightmare and then woken up with a strange sense of relief? That relief didn't come because the nightmare was pleasant. It came because you were prepared emotionally for something far worse than reality offered. When we allow ourselves to contemplate difficulty, we soften its impact. There's also a hidden paradox here. By rehearsing worst-case scenarios, we begin to live with less anxiety, not more. Why? Because anxiety lives in the shadows where we refuse to look. But when you shine light into those corners, the monsters shrink. Suddenly, you're no longer afraid of losing a job because you've imagined how you would survive. You're no longer afraid of being alone because you've visualized how to stand in that solitude with strength. You begin to realize that your peace does not depend on external stability, but on internal readiness. And that is a power no one can take. Now, how do we practice this in daily life? One way is through journaling. Marcus Aurelius did it every night. In your journal, simply ask, what might go wrong tomorrow? What could I lose and how can I meet it with dignity? You don't have to spend an hour. Even 5 minutes of honest reflection can begin to build a mental framework for resilience. Another way is through visualization. Sit quietly, close your eyes, and walk yourself through a difficult scenario. Feel the emotions, but don't run. Stay. Ask yourself, what is within my control? What virtues can I embody here? Patience, courage, humility. And finally, you can practice this through conversation. Talk with people you trust. Ask each other, what's the worst that could happen, and how could we handle it with grace? In this way, Premeditatio Malorum becomes not just a Stoic concept, but a way of living more honestly, more fully, and more wisely. Because here's the truth. Life will bring hardship. Not maybe, not someday. It will come. And when it does, the person who has rehearsed not with fear, but with courage will not be broken. They will be ready. In our next conversation, we will explore this idea of control more deeply. What is truly ours in life, and what despite all our efforts is not? How did the Stoics draw the line, and how can that line become the foundation for our mental peace? But for now, take this with you. The more you practice meeting your fears in the mind, the less power they hold in the world. And as Epictetus taught us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That includes in your practice of imagining the worst. Not because you're negative, but because you are building a strength that most never even think to develop. We'll walk further together soon. Until then, imagine gently and prepare wisely. Let's sit with a quiet thought for a moment. Imagine, if you will, a man standing in a storm, arms outstretched. The wind tears at his clothes. The rain lashes his skin. The trees behind him groan under the pressure. But the man is still. He is not resisting the weather. He is not pleading for it to stop. He is simply choosing where his power ends and where it begins. This is where many people stumble in life. They prepare for adversity, yes. They rehearse hardship in the mind. But they forget the most vital companion to Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic understanding of control. Because it is not enough to imagine disaster. We must also learn to discern what belongs to us and what does not. Epictetus opened his famous Enchiridion with a sentence so simple yet so profound it echoes across centuries. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. This is the Stoic foundation. The weather is not up to us. The words of others out of our hands. Fortune, fate, the passing of time, not ours to command. But what is up to us? Our judgments, our actions, our choices, our values. That is where freedom lives. When we fail to understand this boundary, we suffer unnecessarily. We spend our energy trying to rewrite the script of the world, rather than rehearsing our role within it. There's a story I once heard about a pilot named Clara. She flew commercial airlines for over 2 decades. One day during a storm, the aircraft she was guiding suddenly dropped thousands of feet due to wind shear. Oxygen masks fell. Passengers screamed. Panic spread like fire. Clara later told her team that in that moment, she focused on only 2 things, her breath and her hands on the controls. The storm outside the plane, she said, was not mine. But the way I met it, that was. It's a powerful image. And it's not just about airplanes or storms. It's about your life. You may not be able to stop the diagnosis from coming. You may not be able to prevent a loved one from leaving. You may not be able to shield your children from every disappointment. But you can always control how you meet those moments. This is where the real discipline begins. Premeditatio Malorum is not simply a thought experiment. It is a practice in surrendering to what you cannot control and doubling down on what you can. The Stoics referred to this as living according to nature. But by nature, they didn't mean trees or rivers. They meant the nature of things as they are, the order of the world, the logic of cause and effect, the deep, often invisible lines that divide what is within our grasp and what floats beyond it like a leaf on the wind. The philosopher Cleanthes once said, "Lead me, Zeus, and destiny wherever you have assigned me. I'll follow without hesitation. But even if I do not wish to still, I will follow, groaning." He wasn't advocating fatalism. He was teaching alignment, harmony, the wisdom of no longer trying to move the unmovable. Now, I want to speak to something tender. Sometimes what's outside our control includes the very things we love most. The health of a spouse, the future of a child, the way others see us, the outcome of a dream we've poured our soul into. These are not small things. They are not easy to let go of. But the Stoic way is not about cold detachment. It's about noble clarity. To love fully while understanding we do not own. To work hard while knowing we may not succeed. To care deeply while accepting we may be misunderstood. This is the paradox. We gain peace not by gripping tighter, but by holding wisely. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But he also wrote with the softness of a man who understood loss. He buried children, he fought wars, he lost friends, and yet he returned over and over to this simple truth: I do not control outcomes. I only control how I meet them. This is where freedom begins. Now, let's pause and bring this closer to your life. Think for a moment, what are you trying to control right now that you cannot? Maybe it's someone else's opinion of you. Maybe it's a decision your boss will make. Maybe it's a result you desperately want, or a pain you're trying to prevent in someone else. What would it feel like to let go of that, not in resignation, but in strength? To say, this part is not mine, but this next part, my response, my character, my grace that is mine entirely. When we make that shift, we stop wasting energy on the unchangeable and begin investing it where it matters in our own soul. And this is where Premeditatio Malorum becomes most transformative. When we imagine the worst, not just to prepare but to clarify, we begin to see that much of what we fear is outside our control anyway. And if it's outside our control, then why invest so much of ourselves in the outcome? There's a beautiful story from the life of Admiral James Stockdale, a Stoic in modern armor. Captured during the Vietnam War, he spent over 7 years in a prisoner of war camp, tortured, starved, isolated. And yet when asked later how he survived, he said, "I never lost faith in the end of the story, but I also confronted the most brutal facts of my reality." He didn't control his freedom, he didn't control his captors, but he controlled his mind, his values, his courage. That circle of control became his lifeline. You have that lifeline too. Every day draw that invisible line in your mind. This is mine. This is not. This I will act on. that I will release. And over time, your energy will return to you. Your focus will sharpen. You will become less reactive, more peaceful. Not because life is easier, but because you've stopped trying to control what was never yours. In our next reflection, we will begin to explore something even deeper, the role of suffering itself. What if suffering, when faced well, isn't just something to survive, but something that shapes us? But for now, I'll leave you with this quiet invitation. Choose today where your power ends and where it begins. Let that be the place where your peace is born. Imagine, if you will, standing barefoot on scorched earth. The fire has already passed. The smoke is thinning. Around you, the world has changed. The house you once knew is ash. The walls that held your laughter gone. The familiar shape of your life unrecognizable. Yet, somehow, here you are, still breathing, still standing. This is what it means to suffer, and sooner or later, it comes for all of us. There's no one, no matter how rich, careful, virtuous, or cautious, who escapes this part of being human. The body weakens, love leaves, accidents strike, illness arrives, plans crumble, even the brightest day will one day dim. But the Stoics were never interested in escaping pain. They wanted something far more difficult and far more profound. They wanted to transform it. They believed that suffering is not the enemy, but the crucible in which character is formed. That to suffer with awareness, with preparation, with intention, is to be refined, not ruined. Epictetus, who lived much of his life with a crippled leg after a Roman master twisted it until it broke, once said, "Difficulties show a person's character." So, when trouble comes, think of yourself as a wrestler whom God has matched with a tough young buck. For what purpose to turn you into Olympic-class material? He didn't say suffering is good. He said it is necessary if we are to grow. Now, that is not easy to accept. Pain, when it visits, feels cruel. It isolates us. It takes things away. Sometimes people we love, sometimes parts of ourselves. Sometimes it leaves no visible wounds at all, just silence, depression, disorientation. But the Stoics did not ask us to smile through it. They asked us to remain upright in it, like a tree that bends in the storm but does not snap. Marcus Aurelius, writing during a time of plague and personal tragedy, said something remarkable. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Let that settle for a moment. The obstacle is the way. Not because the pain is pleasant, but because how we respond to it reveals the truth about us. Anyone can be kind when things are easy. Anyone can speak of courage when the sun is shining. But the one who chooses virtue in the midst of pain, that is a person becoming free. There is a story about a mother named Helen who lost her only son to a car crash. He was 19, the kind of boy who left poems on her desk and brought tea without asking. For a year after his death, she disappeared from public life. And then slowly she returned, quiet, soft-spoken, changed. At a gathering where she was asked how she coped, she said this: "Every day I woke up thinking, why should I keep breathing? And every day I told myself, because I must honor the fact that I can. My grief did not destroy me, it shaped me. And now I carry him differently, not in my arms, in my actions." This is not Stoicism in a book. This is Stoicism in flesh. It is precisely here, in the heat of loss, in the throes of suffering, that Premeditatio Malorum becomes more than theory. It becomes lifeblood. It becomes the shield that doesn't keep pain away, but softens its first blow. You see, when we rehearse misfortune not as fantasy, but as preparation, we take some of the terror out of suffering. We give our minds a framework, a script, a path to follow when the ground gives way. We say, "I've imagined this moment. I am not unprepared. I have chosen already how I will walk through this." And that choice is everything, because you will suffer. But you do not have to suffer blindly. The Stoics never promised escape. They promised readiness, that when the fire comes, you will not be consumed. You will be forged. There's an old quote from Seneca that often makes people pause. "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Strange, isn't it? To think that without suffering we are somehow incomplete. But maybe it's true. Maybe suffering is the whetstone that sharpens our inner edge, the winter that deepens our roots, the breaking that opens the door to a deeper strength. And yet, this is crucial: we must never romanticize pain. The Stoics did not seek it. They did not wish it on others. But they did believe that pain, when met with discipline and grace, can purify the soul. The real question then is not will I suffer? It is how will I suffer? Will I curse the wind, or will I become the sail? Will I collapse, or will I bend? Will I retreat into bitterness, or will I let the pain carve deeper compassion? Each moment of adversity is an invitation to choose not the circumstance, but the response. And that is where power lives. As Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, once wrote, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Frankl lost his entire family in the camps. He saw cruelty that defied comprehension, and still he believed this. We are not free from suffering, but we are free in suffering. That is what the Stoics prepared for. Not comfort, but courage. They trained their minds like soldiers, not for peace, but for the inevitable battle. And if you've ever been through something that nearly undid you a death, a betrayal, a season of depression, then you know this suffering doesn't always make you better. Sometimes it makes you bitter, unless you are prepared, unless you have laid the groundwork before the storm. That is why we do this work. That is why we imagine the loss, the failure, the sickness, not to summon it, but to know how we will meet it, so that when life takes what it will, we still have something left, something that cannot be taken our character. In our next step together, we'll explore this very idea. What is character truly? How do the Stoics define virtue not in theory, but in practice? And why did they believe it was the only thing truly worth protecting? But before that, let me leave you with this. Pain is not a punishment. It is not the universe singling you out. It is a teacher harsh, yes, but a teacher nonetheless. And if we are willing to sit with it, to meet it not with resistance but with resolve, we may yet emerge stronger, not untouched, but unshaken. Imagine, if you will, that everything you own is taken from you. The house is gone. The savings vanished. Your reputation tarnished by rumors you cannot undo. Even your body begins to fail slowly and without mercy. You are left with nothing the world values, nothing to prove who you were. Now ask yourself, what remains in that moment of absolute exposure when the winds of fate have stripped you bare what cannot be taken? The Stoics had one answer: your character, your virtue, your ability to choose what kind of person you will be regardless of what happens around you. That they said is the only true possession, the only wealth that no thief, no illness, no misfortune can touch. And that's why they spent their lives not chasing status, not clinging to comfort, but refining the self. Because who you are when everything else is gone, that is who you truly are. It sounds simple, but it is the most demanding discipline of all. The Stoics believed that the good life eudaimonia, as the Greeks called it, is not found in pleasure or success or even happiness as we define it today. It is found in the consistent conscious pursuit of virtue. And what is virtue? For the Stoics, it was not a vague moral glow or a list of religious commandments. It was made of 4 clear pillars: wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Wisdom to know what is truly good, courage to face what is difficult, justice to give others their due, temperance to restrain desires and remain balanced. Everything else, health, wealth, fame, pleasure, even life itself, was seen as preferred, but ultimately indifferent. These external things might make life smoother, but they could never make it good in the deep sense. And this is where Premeditatio Malorum comes in again. Because when you imagine loss honestly, vividly, you begin to strip away your attachments to what is not truly yours. You begin to see what the Stoics saw, that nothing outside of your own moral purpose belongs to you. Your car can be stolen. Your job can be lost. Your beauty will fade. Even your loved ones, you cannot keep them forever. But your commitment to justice, that is yours. Your willingness to act with courage, yours. Your refusal to lie, even when it costs you yours. These are the treasures no fire can burn. And this shift, this turning inward toward the things that are always within your grasp, is what allows the Stoic to face tragedy, not with despair, but with clarity. There's a moment in the writings of Epictetus where he reflects on the idea of insult. If someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, he writes, do not make excuses, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, or he would not have mentioned only these. It's more than humor, it's freedom. The man who does not tie his worth to others' opinions is untouchable. The woman who builds her value on her actions, not her outcomes, is already secure. And this is what character does. It roots us in a place beyond praise or blame. It is tempting in our world to measure success by numbers, by income, followers, titles, applause. But the Stoic asks something quieter, something far more demanding. Who are you when no one is watching? Because that is what will remain when everything else is stripped away. Let me tell you a story. There was once a small-town judge named Raymond. In his youth, he had dreamed of the Supreme Court, but life, as it often does, had other plans. His wife became ill. His parents needed care. He stayed in his hometown, declining higher offers, choosing instead to live a life close to those he loved. Decades passed. He was never famous. He was never rich. But at his funeral, hundreds came. Not because he had power, but because he had integrity. He had helped people quietly, made rulings fairly, spoken gently, even in anger. He had chosen character over ambition, and in the end, he had built something more lasting than reputation. He had built a soul. That's what the Stoics teach us, that the soul must be forged like iron through heat, through pressure, through trial, not by escaping hardship, but by acting rightly within it. This doesn't mean we become emotionless. On the contrary, the Stoics felt deeply, but they believed that our emotions must serve our values, not rule over them. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He wasn't denying pain. He was reminding us that we often make our suffering worse by forgetting what truly matters. When we fear poverty, we forget that generosity is still possible. When we fear death, we forget that dignity remains. When we fear failure, we forget that effort. Honest, full-hearted effort is its own reward. So the next time you imagine misfortune, the job loss, the diagnosis, the betrayal, ask yourself, what part of me will remain untouched, and then strengthen that part? Because that is your anchor, that is your compass, that is your true wealth. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." So, aim high not in what you gain, but in how you live. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore how to make this inner strength not just something we practice in solitude, but something we carry into the chaos of everyday life. How do we live stoically, not just in theory, but in traffic, in meetings, and heartbreak? But for now, I invite you to consider this. If everything were taken from you tomorrow, what would you still be proud of? Let that be the thing you build your life upon. Imagine, if you will, that you are standing in the middle of a crowded train station. People rush past you, some laughing into phones, some muttering frustrations, some simply lost in thought. The announcements echo overhead. The lights flicker. Someone bumps into your shoulder. A child is crying. You're late and you're tired. Now ask yourself, can I still be a philosopher here? This is the quiet challenge of Stoicism, not to speak wisdom in a monastery, but to live it in traffic. Not to quote Marcus Aurelius when all is well, but to remember him when the waiter is rude, the deadline looms, and the baby won't sleep. This is where Premeditatio Malorum becomes something even more powerful, a way of moving through the noise without letting it move through you. Because this modern life we live, it's not made for stillness. It's made for speed, opinion, outrage, distraction. It trains us to react quickly, not to respond wisely. And so, without preparation, we're pulled in every direction. But the Stoics offer us a different rhythm, a slower one, a grounded one that says, no matter what surrounds me, I will hold my center. And that's not poetic. That's practical. Let me tell you a story. There was a young lawyer named Samantha, bright, determined, talented, but easily rattled. A rude email would ruin her day. A critical client would shake her confidence. She felt, in her own words, like a leaf in the wind. Then one day, while researching techniques for courtroom resilience, she stumbled upon the writings of Marcus Aurelius. His words hit her like a revelation. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. And so, she began a quiet experiment. Every morning, she spent 10 minutes rehearsing what might go wrong that day. A colleague might embarrass her. Her case might stall. Someone might misjudge her. She walked through those possibilities, and then she asked herself, how will I meet them? Within weeks, something shifted. The same stressors came, but they no longer owned her. She became not immune, but independent. She had found her still point. That is what the Stoics train us for. Not a life without noise, but a life where noise doesn't drown out our inner voice. It begins with anticipation. Premeditatio Malorum invites you each morning to mentally walk into your day before it begins. Not just planning tasks, but imagining friction. You ask, what if the meeting is chaotic? What if I lose the deal? What if I'm misunderstood? And then you walk through your response, not just what you'll do, but how you'll be. Will I speak calmly? Will I maintain fairness? Will I resist the temptation to blame? This is not pessimism. This is rehearsal. It's not fear. It's readiness. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." And where do we waste it most? In reactivity. In anger, anxiety, defensiveness, emotions that could have been softened if we had taken just a few moments to expect them. Modern Stoic thinkers sometimes call this negative visualization. But it is not negative in the emotional sense. It is active. It is intentional. It is a quiet armor, because life rarely unfolds the way we hope, but it often unfolds exactly the way we feared, only we didn't prepare. And this preparation must include even the smallest moments. When you're stuck in traffic, can I practice patience now, not tomorrow? When someone interrupts you, can I choose curiosity over pride? When your body aches, can I remember that discomfort is not the end of dignity? This is where Stoicism lives, not on ancient scrolls, but in everyday frictions. The cashier who moves too slowly, the neighbor who plays loud music. The moment your coffee spills, your child cries, your plans fall apart. Here too you are invited to remember, I've seen this coming. I've walked this path already in my mind, and now I will walk it in my behavior. Because the Stoics were not saints. They were not cold or rigid or indifferent. They were human beings with tempers and doubts and limitations. But they chose over and over to respond, not react. To act from values, not moods. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every person he encountered was someone struggling with their own inner war. He wrote, "When you wake in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good, and I will not be harmed." What strength lies in those words? They remind us that we are not at the mercy of circumstance. We are not required to mirror the chaos around us. We are free to choose again and again how we show up. That's what Stoicism offers in the modern world. Not a withdrawal from life, but a deeper engagement with it anchored in virtue. And the beauty of it is this: the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. It doesn't happen all at once. You will still lose your temper. You will still get hurt. But slowly, steadily, your center holds. The space between trigger and response widens. You begin to live less like a leaf in the wind and more like the tree, rooted, flexible, unshaken. In the next part of our journey, we will explore this idea of detachment not as coldness, but as clarity. What does it mean to hold things loosely, to love, without clinging to care, without control? But for now, ask yourself, how would today have gone if I had rehearsed the interruptions? And how different might tomorrow be if you do? Imagine, if you will, holding a small bird in your hand. It rests calmly in your palm, its feathers warm, its tiny chest rising and falling with breath. You know you cannot keep it. You know the moment will pass, but still you hold it not with a grip, not with a cage, but with care. And then when it lifts its wings, you let go. This is what the Stoics meant by detachment. Not coldness, not numbness, but the wisdom to love what is fleeting without becoming a prisoner to it. In fact, it might be one of the most misunderstood ideas in Stoicism, the notion that detachment means turning away from feeling or caring or connection. But this could not be further from the truth. To the Stoics, detachment is not the absence of emotion. It is the mastery of it. It is loving deeply, but not with ownership. It is caring fiercely, but not with desperation. It is engaging fully, but always aware of the impermanence behind every form. This kind of detachment doesn't come from closing your heart. It comes from opening it so wide that you no longer need to grip what you love in fear. Epictetus said, "Never say about anything, 'I have lost it,' but only, 'I have given it back.' Has your child died? It has been given back. Has your wife died? She has been given back. Has your estate been taken? Well, that too has been given back. At first that may sound cold, even brutal, but look deeper. He is not telling you not to grieve. He is telling you to remember that nothing is yours by right. Everything is given on loan, from the people we love, to the bodies we inhabit, to the time we're allotted. And when we remember this, truly remember, we stop clinging. We start cherishing. There is a difference between loving someone and attaching your identity to them, between enjoying wealth and depending on it for peace, between taking pride in your health and believing it makes you immune to loss. Premeditatio Malorum helps us practice this loosening. Each time you imagine the loss of something precious, your job, your relationship, your physical strength, you are not being morbid. You are gently releasing your grip, not to push that thing away, but to learn to hold it better, more consciously, more gratefully, more freely. There's a woman I once met named Sophia. She had built a successful art studio over 30 years. It was her dream, her identity, her legacy. Then one night, a fire started in the building next door. By dawn, everything was gone. When I spoke with her months later, I expected bitterness, but she said something I will never forget. That studio was never mine. I was only ever its caretaker, and I am grateful I got to love it for as long as I did. That is the heart of Stoic detachment. To see beauty as something borrowed, to experience success as something shared, to let go not with resentment, but with reverence. Marcus Aurelius, writing from within the palace walls of imperial Rome, where he had access to every pleasure and possession imaginable, reminded himself constantly, "You may leave this life today. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." He wasn't being morose. He was training his mind to let go in advance so that he could be present now. Because when you remember you are temporary, you live differently. You say "I love you" more often. You waste less time arguing. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to forgive or to begin again. There is great tenderness in this kind of detachment. It allows you to hold people with more gentleness, not less. To love them as they are without trying to control how long they stay. To love yourself even as you change. Detachment is not distance, it is depth. It is choosing not to build your identity on things that are built to pass away. The Stoics saw this clearly. They saw the tides of fortune rise and fall. They saw emperors overthrown, cities burned, friends buried, and still they chose to live with open hands. They did not deny love. They elevated it beyond possession. So, how do we begin to live this way? Start small. When you drink your coffee in the morning, remind yourself, "One day I won't taste this again." When you speak with a loved one, remember, "This could be the last time I say these words." Not to sink into sadness, but to awaken into appreciation. And when you feel fear gripping you, fear of losing what you have, gently practice letting go in your mind. What if this thing left me? How would I carry myself? Who would I become? What would remain in this way? Premeditatio Malorum becomes not only a shield against panic, but a doorway into deeper love. Because once you stop needing everything to stay, you are free to enjoy it while it lasts. This is the paradox. When we let go, we hold better. When we loosen our grip, we deepen our gratitude. And when we stop expecting permanence, we begin to live more fully in the fragile beauty of now. In the next part of our journey, we will explore the quiet, radical strength of acceptance. What does it truly mean to say, "This is what life has given me, and I will meet it not with resistance but with resolve"? But for now, I leave you with this. The bird was never yours. And that is exactly why it was so beautiful in your hand. Imagine, if you will, standing at a crossroads on a quiet morning. To your left, the road you hoped for, straight paved, lined with comfort and ease. To your right, the path you never wanted, steep, uneven, shrouded in fog. But now, picture a third direction. Not one you choose, but one that chooses you. A path carved not by your will, but by reality itself. You didn't plan for it. You wouldn't have asked for it. And yet it's here, and you must walk it. Now ask yourself, can I walk this path with grace that is the heart of acceptance? Not resignation, not giving up, but leaning into what is instead of forever fighting what isn't. The Stoics didn't believe in surrendering to life passively. They believed in saying yes to it actively, even when it brings sorrow, loss, pain, or confusion, especially then. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, wrote Epictetus, but rather want them to happen the way they do happen, and your life will go smoothly. That may sound impossible at first. Why would I want pain? Why would I welcome failure? The Stoics would say you're not being asked to enjoy suffering. You're being invited to stop resisting reality, because suffering often intensifies when we argue with what is. When we say, "This shouldn't have happened. This isn't fair. This is not how it was supposed to go." And maybe we're right. Maybe it isn't fair. But fair or not, it is. It has arrived. And what happens next, how we meet the thing we didn't choose, that is where our power lies. There's a man named Daniel who once told me a story about his divorce. He had loved his wife deeply, had believed as many of us do in forever. But forever ended unexpectedly. No betrayal, no cruelty. Just the quiet, aching realization that they had grown apart. For months he fought it. He begged, bargained, denied. And then one day, sitting on a park bench with a copy of Meditations open in his lap, he read this line from Marcus Aurelius: "Accept whatever comes to you, woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs." Daniel said he closed the book and cried, not because the pain had vanished, but because he had finally stopped fighting what was already true. Acceptance isn't passive, it is fiercely active. It takes courage to look life in the eye and say, "Yes, even this." The Stoics often used a beautiful image for this idea, the metaphor of a dog tied to a moving cart. The cart represents fate, life, circumstance. The dog can dig in its heels, be dragged through the mud, and suffer every jolt, or it can walk alongside the cart, moving in the same direction, finding moments of dignity in each step. The dog's path is not optional, but how it walks, that is its choice. So too for us. We don't control the timing of death, the cruelty of others, the breaking of things we love, but we do control how we walk through the unfolding of life. To accept is not to say, "I like this." It is to say, "This is mine to face, and I will meet it well." And sometimes that is the only power we have left. The world may strip you of everything: your job, your strength, your status, your loved ones. But if you can still say, "I will face this with integrity," then nothing essential has been lost. That's why the Stoics practice Premeditatio Malorum. They wanted to be ready not just for hardship, but for the surrender that hardship demands. They imagined the death of children, the fall of empires, the loss of everything they valued, not to become hard, but to become soft in the right ways, yielding to what must be yielded to, letting go of what cannot be held, and standing still with dignity. There is beauty in that kind of strength. It is not the beauty of heroism or triumph. It is quieter, like the beauty of an old tree bent by storms, still alive. Now ask yourself gently, what are you still resisting in your life? Maybe it's an ending you didn't want, a diagnosis you can't reverse, a version of yourself you hoped to become but didn't, a truth you've tried to pretend isn't real. What would happen if instead of fighting, you whispered yes? Even this, not as surrender, but as strength. Because the moment we accept reality as it is, we stop wasting energy trying to rewrite the past and start walking into the future with both feet on the ground. And here's the paradox. It is in that moment of acceptance that transformation begins. Pain becomes a teacher. Grief becomes a doorway. Disappointment becomes a path back to yourself. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, what stands in the way becomes the way, but only if you let it. Only if you stop saying, "Why me?" and begin saying, "Now what?" In our next conversation, we will explore this further. How pain properly faced becomes a guide. How adversity once accepted can become the very force that shapes your best self. But for now, sit with this. Life does not owe you ease. It owes you nothing. But it offers you everything if you are willing to accept it exactly as it is. Not perfect, not painless, but profoundly yours. Imagine, if you will, a blade in the hands of a blacksmith. It is heated, hammered, plunged into water, and then fired again. Again and again it is struck and scorched. Not to destroy it, but to harden it. Not to ruin it, but to shape it into something precise, strong, enduring. Now ask yourself, what if life does the same to us? What if adversity is not just something to avoid or endure, but the very furnace in which we are forged? The Stoics believed this deeply. They did not see suffering as some error in the system of life. They saw it as the system itself, a natural and even necessary part of becoming whole. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests, gold, suffering tests, brave men." But he didn't mean that suffering automatically makes us better. That would be naive. No suffering reveals. It sharpens. It offers us a choice. Will we be broken by the blow, or will we be formed by it? And Premeditatio Malorum, the practice of mentally walking through our worst fears, was not only a preparation for impact, it was training in how to grow from it. By imagining adversity in advance, we begin to ask better questions. Not, why is this happening to me, but what is this trying to show me? What part of myself will this reveal? What strength might this awaken in me that would never rise in comfort? There's a story of a man named Elias, a craftsman who lost his dominant hand in an accident. He had worked with wood his entire life. The loss devastated him. But after a long and dark season, he began to teach himself to work with his other hand. It was slow, frustrating, humbling. But over time, he not only regained his skill, he became even more precise, more intentional, more aware. I lost what I thought defined me, he said. But I found a part of myself that I had ignored for decades. That is the alchemy of adversity. It doesn't just strip you down. It invites you to rebuild with stronger materials. And not just strength, but virtue. Because adversity invites courage, it invites humility, it invites patience, it invites perseverance. In a world where comfort is often sold as the highest good, the Stoics dared to suggest the opposite, that ease softens us, but challenge defines us. Marcus Aurelius, no stranger to illness, war, and betrayal, wrote in his journals, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That's not denial, that's transformation. The moment you change how you see the obstacle, it becomes your teacher. The pain becomes not just bearable, but meaningful. The failure becomes not just a loss, but a redirection. The betrayal becomes not just a wound, but a lesson in discernment. Even death, when contemplated honestly, becomes not just an end, but a reason to live more truly now. And this mindset, this reframing of adversity, does not happen in the moment of crisis. It happens before. It is cultivated like muscle, through daily practice, through imagining the loss, rehearsing the pain, walking through the fire mentally, so that when it comes, your soul has already begun the work. This is not easy work, but it is necessary, and it is liberating. Because once you understand that adversity is inevitable, you stop being surprised by it. And when you stop being surprised, you stop being defeated. You begin to greet hardship not with "why me," but with "ah, there you are. Let's see who I can become now." And this doesn't mean you stop grieving, or hurting, or doubting. It means you stop resisting the growth that pain demands. It means you begin to trust the process, not blindly, but bravely. You begin to say, "Let the fire come. Let it burn away what is false. Let it leave behind only what is real." And when you do this long enough, something extraordinary begins to happen. You no longer fear loss the way you once did. You no longer fear failure. You no longer even fear death, not because you are immune, but because you are prepared. Because you have lived enough times in your mind the endings you dread, and you've seen that even there you still exist. Even there you still have something no one can touch: your virtue, your choice, your response. That's why the Stoics practice Premeditatio Malorum, not to become pessimists, but to become unshakable, to walk into the burning building of life, knowing that everything around them might fall, but their core, that inner citadel, as Marcus called it, would still stand. In our final chapter together, we will bring this journey home. We will look at what it means to live fully in the face of death. Not someday, but now. To integrate everything we've explored, the preparation, the control, the character, the detachment, the acceptance, and ask, what does it mean to live well, knowing the end is always near? But for now, I leave you with this. If you are in the fire, let it shape you. Do not waste your suffering. Do not hide from the pain. Use it. Let it carve the better version of you from within the ashes of what was. Imagine, if you will, waking tomorrow with the clear knowledge that today is your last. No alarms, no panic, just a quiet certainty. There would be no more postponing, no more waiting for the right moment to forgive, or to speak, or to begin again. You wouldn't waste your time on petty arguments. You wouldn't scroll mindlessly or chase approval or replay old mistakes. You would live finally, not for the illusion of control, but for the truth of now. This is where our journey ends, or perhaps more truly, where it begins. Because everything we've explored, Premeditatio Malorum, the discipline of anticipation, the clarity of control, the growth through suffering, the strength of character, the art of detachment, the courage of acceptance has been pointing here, to this final practice, to live as if you have already died, not in morbidity, not in fear, but in freedom. Seneca said it simply, let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day. This is not metaphor. This is a way of walking through the world with urgency, not haste, with awareness, not anxiety, with purpose, not pressure. To live as if death is already behind you is to understand that the only time you truly possess is this one, this breath, this hour, this fleeting sacred now. And here is the secret. When you carry death on your shoulder, you start to live from the depths of your being. You stop needing more to feel full. You stop needing forever to make peace. You stop waiting. You begin instead to see. The smile of a stranger is enough. A single honest conversation is enough. The scent of morning coffee, the ache in your knees, the sound of your child breathing in sleep. These things are enough. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." To the Stoics, this wasn't fatalism. It was a call to wake up, to stop pretending that life is a rehearsal, to stop living as if we have infinite drafts of this day. We don't. The death we fear is not far away. It's beside us always. And it is not our enemy. It is our reminder. There's a beauty that only death reveals. Because when you see that everything will end, you stop waiting for it to be perfect and you start loving it as it is. The imperfect parent, the flawed partner, the body that no longer looks the way it did, the work that went unnoticed, the silence you used to run from. You stop asking the world to be fair or painless or predictable. You stop needing every door to stay open. You begin to walk lighter, love deeper, speak more truly. Not because everything is going well, but because you are awake to its impermanence. This is the power of Premeditatio Malorum fully realized. Not simply a mental exercise, not simply a shield, but a doorway into fuller living. Because once you have imagined the worst and seen that you still remain, that your virtue still holds, that your mind is still yours, that your character cannot be taken, then you begin to move through life without fear. You no longer grip each thing in terror of its passing. You honor it precisely because it will pass. And this includes your own breath. This includes your time. The Stoics did not worship death. They simply befriended it, so that life would not pass them by unnoticed. They stood at funerals and reminded themselves, this too will be me. They kissed their children goodnight and whispered to their hearts, they are not mine to keep. They walked into meetings, battles, illnesses, and mournings with one truth burning quietly in their minds. Memento mori, remember that you will die, but also remember to live. And so I leave you here not with an ending, but with a beginning. You have walked with the Stoics. You have stepped into the storm. Imagine the losses, faced the fire, let go of control, chosen character, practiced detachment, embraced what is, found meaning in adversity. And now, only one question remains. Will you live as if you have already died, not fearfully, but freely, not shrinking, but expanding into every moment? Will you pause in the middle of an ordinary day and remind yourself, this is not guaranteed, this is not promised, but this is mine right now? And if so, then you are already walking the Stoic path, not in marble halls or ancient scrolls, but in the soft courage of each present breath. So, go live wisely, love bravely, let go freely, and prepare always not just for the worst, but for the wonder that still remains. Imagine, if you will, standing at the edge of a quiet lake just moments before the storm breaks. The water is still almost eerily so. The sky above is painted in gray hues, and the birds have gone silent. You know something is coming. You feel it, but you are not afraid. You've prepared for this. Now imagine the same storm catching you unaware, arriving like a thief in the night, ripping up trees, shattering windows, and drenching everything in chaos. Which would you rather face, the storm you saw coming, or the one you chose to ignore? This is where our story begins. You see, life doesn't always knock before entering. It barges in unannounced and sometimes with devastating force. A sudden illness, the betrayal of a friend, the loss of a job, a car accident, a phone call in the middle of the night. These are the storms of human experience, and though we cannot stop them, we can prepare ourselves to meet them not with panic, but with poise, not with despair, but with clarity. There is a quiet power in preparation. The Stoics called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. But don't let the name mislead you. This isn't pessimism. It's not about expecting the worst for the sake of misery. It's about stepping into the future with eyes wide open and asking, what if this doesn't go the way I hope? What if the worst does happen? What then Seneca, that Roman statesman and philosopher, once wrote, "He robs present ills of their power, who has perceived their coming beforehand." This is the essence of Stoicism, not indifference, but endurance, not numbness, but discipline. Let's walk slowly into this idea together, not as theorists or armchair philosophers, but as human beings, fallible, emotional, vulnerable. Let's sit with the ancient wisdom that has helped soldiers, emperors, monks, and wanderers endure suffering, not by ignoring it, but by facing it before it arrives. Take Marcus Aurelius, for instance, the philosopher king. At night before sleep took him, he would journal quietly to himself. Today I may encounter ingratitude, arrogance, deceit, betrayal. He wasn't casting a dark spell over the day to come. He was bracing his mind as a warrior tightens the straps of his armor before battle. He understood that to expect only smooth sailing was to be naive. To imagine the worst, however, was not to summon it, but to rob it of its surprise. And what a difference that makes. A woman named Eliza once told me a story that has never left me. She was 64 when we met, a quiet, dignified widow who had lived through more than her share of sorrow. Her husband died suddenly of a heart attack while they were watching the news one evening. Just like that, he was gone, no warning, no goodbye. For weeks, grief clawed at her chest like an animal, but Eliza was no stranger to Stoicism. For years, she had been reading Epictetus, reminding herself that nothing in life is truly ours, not our possessions, not even the people we love. We must love them, she told me, as if they are on loan. And because of this habit of mind, her grief, though deep, did not destroy her. It came, she said, but I had already welcomed it in my mind long ago. I was ready. That is the gift of Premeditatio Malorum. It does not prevent the fall, but it makes the landing bearable. It teaches us to hold life gently like a bird in our palm, never so tight that we crush it, never so loose that it flies away. It shows us how to live, not in fear, but in wisdom. Because once you have imagined the worst, you can begin to live fully in the present, unchained from dread. There's something strangely freeing about naming the monsters before they arrive. It's as if they shrink under the light. The Stoics knew this. They practiced it like a form of spiritual exercise. Each morning or evening, they would contemplate the possibilities of failure, rejection, injury, illness, even death, not to invite them, but to rehearse their response. Think of it like fire drills for the soul. And yet, modern life teaches us the opposite, doesn't it? We are told to stay positive, to manifest success, to visualize the best. And there is value in optimism. Of course there is. But optimism without resilience is a glass tower. Beautiful to behold, but fragile in the face of real hardship. The Stoic way, by contrast, is grounded. It acknowledges life's impermanence. It prepares the mind, not just the calendar. And most importantly, it honors the truth that we are not in control of outcomes, only our reactions to them. This isn't a rejection of joy, it is its safeguard. Let's return for a moment to Marcus Aurelius. He ruled an empire during times of plague war and personal loss. His words, written in solitude and never intended for publication, have survived for centuries because they speak directly to our fragile human condition. He once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So, I ask you now, what storm are you pretending won't come? Maybe it's the slow aging of your body, the unspoken tension in your family, the career that may not last, the partner who may leave, or the child who may suffer. These are difficult thoughts, but they are not morbid, they are courageous, and they are necessary. To practice Premeditatio Malorum is to walk through the shadows with a candle, not to be consumed by darkness, but to understand it. to welcome the full spectrum of life, not just its pleasures. And when we do this consistently, something begins to change within us. We become less reactive, less shaken. We stop being surprised by hardship, and instead begin to meet it with a calm kind of grace. We stop expecting the world to treat us gently, and in that moment, we become truly strong. This is not a one-time insight, it's a lifelong discipline, and that's why this journey will take us through 10 conversations, 10 evenings, if you will, by the firelight of philosophy. We will walk with the Stoics. We will learn from their battles and their silence, from their triumphs and their losses, and we will apply their ancient tools to the modern world, not as museum pieces, but as living instruments for our peace of mind. In the next part of our journey, we'll dive deeper into the mechanics of mental rehearsal. How exactly did the Stoics prepare their minds for adversity? What techniques did they use, and how can we make them our own? But for now, I invite you to sit with this question as the day ends. What are you afraid to imagine? Because in that imagination lies your preparation. And in preparation, there is peace. Last time we stood together at the edge of the storm. Not to escape it, but to face it. Not with trembling, but with preparation. We opened the door to Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of imagining adversity before it arrives. Now, let's step a little further in. Let's talk not just about why we prepare, but how. What does it look like in real terms to rehearse misfortune without becoming paralyzed by it? How can a practice so focused on imagining the worst actually lead us to a more peaceful, joyful, and courageous life? Imagine for a moment that your mind is a theater. Each day you are both actor and director of what takes place on its stage. Some scenes are written by fate, unexpected, unscripted. Others, though, are yours to rehearse. Now, ask yourself, would you rather enter life stage blind or prepared for your role? The Stoics believe that the most important performances in life are not the ones we give to the world, but the ones we give to ourselves. Take Epictetus, a former slave, who became one of the most revered Stoic teachers. He taught his students not to shy away from imagining hardship, but to lean into it gently and regularly. Keep before your eyes, he said, everyday death and exile, and everything that seems terrible, but most especially death. Then you will never have any base thought, nor too eager a desire. What does this mean in practice? It means spending quiet moments early in the morning, or just before sleep, asking yourself not just what could go right, but what could go wrong.